I mean, I welcome the use of AI and technology to identify fraud. I worked as an auditor in the private sector, so absolutely appreciate the use of technology to identify. I just want to dig a little bit further into ensuring that the department will be targeting those frauds that are systemic and individuals that perhaps have made mistakes. You know, the forms are complicated. You mentioned earlier about the complication of forms. You mentioned about vulnerable claimants. To ensure the department is focusing on those frauds that are systemic rather than individual cases.
So important, because that's so important. The things that, what I would say, the real changes from the previous government's approach is, number one, we want a very, very clear on the bill, a code of practice on the face of the bill. Secondly, that we want independent oversight of what's happening to make sure what we're doing is right and fair and proportionate with reporting to Parliament. And we want the legislation to be really absolutely as clearly defined as possible. Because look, I think for everybody that is rightly outraged at £10 billion a year going on fraud, when you think of how desperately some people that need that money, at the same time as what's happened with carers allowance and people just going above the threshold and building up debt and then being terrified and worried. And, you know, we have to get this right. And that is partly about trying to make the legislation as properly defined with the right oversight as possible. And Peter and I have had many conversations about this to make sure what we're doing is proportionate with the right oversight, but also about preventing this happening in the first place, particularly for people who just going a bit over on their savings or whatever it is, that we find a way. I mean, I'm, thank goodness now, alerted all the time when I've got an NHS appointment, about 5 times, so I don't forget it. I seem to be rung every single day by energy companies telling me to go onto a smart meter. We at the worst possible times, probably about to happen now, but we've got to find ways of sharing that data, keeping privacy, but sharing that data so people are alerted. But it is also the case, we can't have a situation where our powers haven't been updated for 20 years, where we don't have the same powers as HMRC or even the Child Maintenance Service, where organised criminals are fleecing the system, and where people who are busting a gut and going out and working hard worry about £10 billion on fraud and debt in the system. So we've got to get this right, and we are determined to do that with all the right. But you will probably scrutinise us on that and give us more information and advice, ideas from the private sector, ideas. You know, I am definitely open to ideas, so please, you know, that would be good.
Fantastic.